And we kick it off with the hot topic of the hour. Former President Barack Obama breaking his silence on all the allegations directly from President Trump that he and his administration led the Trump-Russia collusion lie. In a rare public statement, a spokesperson for the former president says this: "Our office does not normally dignify the constant nonsense and misinformation flowing out of the White House with a response, but these claims are outrageous enough to merit one. Nothing in the document issued last week undercuts the widely accepted conclusion that Russia worked to influence the 2016 presidential election, but did not successfully manipulate any votes." President Trump says Obama should be the main focus of a DOJ investigation, along with a group of former high-level officials who also played a part. Watch.
It would be President Obama. He started it. And Biden was there with him. And Comey was there. And Clapper, the whole group was there. Brennan, they were all there in a room. Right here, this was the room. But the leader of the gang was President Obama, Barack Hussein Obama. Have you heard of him? Look, he's guilty. It's not a question. You know, I like to say, let's give it time. It's there. He's guilty. This was treason, and we have all of the documents. And from what Tulsi told me, she's got thousands of additional documents coming. So President Obama, it was his concept, his idea, but he also got it from crooked Hillary Clinton. Crooked is a $3 bill. Hillary Clinton and her group, the Democrats, spent $12 million to Christopher Steele to write up a report that was a total fake report.
The Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, told me on Sunday that more documents are coming out, and they will be out today. They fly in the face of the Obama statement. Joining me now is former federal prosecutor, former DHS Deputy Assistant Secretary, Jonathan Fehe. Jonathan, great to see you. Thank you so much for joining us. Of course, everybody on this program and our audience knows that we pegged this hoax from the start. I've been calling it out for years. What is your reaction now that we see these declassified documents coming out, revealing what we all expected?
Yeah, it's pretty amazing, and the fact that there's still, things are still coming out now showing this is also amazing that it's taken this long. But what it really does show is that, the apparatus, the establishment apparatus and the Democratic Party did everything they could to undermine President Trump's candidacy and also his presidency. And, President Trump talked about the Steele dossier, which was the impetus for a lot of this stuff, was paid for by the Clinton campaign. And remember, they marked it as a legal expense, something that they later say, when Donald Trump marks something a legal expense, it's a major investigation. All of this stinks. And what's interesting about Obama's statement, he doesn't address the fact that Democrats were campaigning on this in 2018, including himself talking about, Russian interference and keeping our elections safe, when they knew the Russians didn't do anything more than they ordinarily did in elections, but they wanted people to think that the Russians not only interfered but changed vote outcomes and things like that, which was, they never had evidence of that, but they wanted the American people to think that, so they always insinuated that, and they use these terms like meddling and colluding, which aren't even legal terms. It's like they just constantly, there was this constant drumbeat and really undermined their Trump presidency, Trump 45 presidency in so many ways. It's so disgraceful. President Obama would be far better off to take a little more humility and say, hey, there were a lot of mistakes made during our presidency, and the Democratic Party can learn a lot from that. But instead, they're almost doubling down because Donald Trump was never in their club, never in the establishment, and they did everything they could to delegitimize him at every step from the campaign to his presidency.
Well, that's right. And remember, at the time, Donald Trump was saying a lot about the need to drain the swamp, change the way Washington worked, and they didn't like that at all. They wanted to hold on to their grip on power. But where do you see the criminality? Because this is going to be a criminal investigation. And back then in 2016 and 2017, I was having Devin Nunes on repeatedly when he was the chairman of the Intelligence Committee. And of course, if you're the chairman of the Intelligence Committee, you see things that others may not. That's why when Adam Schiff came out and said that there was collusion in plain sight when he became the chairman of the Intelligence Committee, people stood up and took notice. But he could not have had any information that showed that there was collusion in plain sight, because we know that he saw what Devin Nunes saw. So was he lying? Did he lie to Congress? Is that a felony? Or, you know, because he's a lawmaker, he doesn't have, you know, to be under oath in that way. The same thing with that meeting in early January in President Obama's office, when we know that John Brennan had handwritten notes, and the handwritten notes said that Russia is aware that Hillary Clinton came up with this story that Trump colluded with Russia. He's got all these handwritten notes that we had at the time that I showed on television. You know, did Brennan lie to Congress? Is that where the criminality is? Where do you see the criminality? And would you expect indictments at the highest order here?
That's where I think you're right. I think where they're going to probably, if there are charges or an investigation, would be things like false statements under oath to Congress, where if you have, you know, evidence that he said one thing and knew one thing here and then goes to Congress and says something else, it's a pretty clean, I don't want to say easily provable, because all these cases end up not being easily provable, but that is sort of a provable type of thing, a perjury, a false statement. Other types of things, are they conspiring to defraud the American people, and other types of things with this information? I think gets more and more complicated, and as you get into that, you get into the issues of immunity and things like that. But I do think things like the false statements, if they are provable, those are the types of things I think that will be investigated further. And it is important to know, when something's referred to DOJ, it doesn't necessarily mean it will ultimately result in convictions or charges. It may just mean further investigations, because the agency that has the information doesn't have the ability to investigate or charge. So we don't really know, but I think it's going to be, they're going to dig deeper, probably talk to, you know, interview people, put people under oath, and see where it goes. But it looks really, really bad. And you're right. It was all about protecting the fourth state, you know, the bureaucracy.
Yeah, and of course they had lots of quote unquote useful idiots. And one of the useful idiots were the mainstream media, because they went with it and sent this story viral across the world. But, you know, Caroline Downey, jump in here, because while they were trying to attack Trump, more classified documents reveal that the FBI did not fully investigate Hillary Clinton and the use of her email server. Senate Judiciary Committee Chairman Chuck Grassley said under Comey's leadership, the FBI failed to perform fundamental investigative work and left key pieces of the evidence on the cutting room floor. This was right before and right after a major presidential election. Trump beat her, and they did not even investigate the fact that she had a server in her basement and was sending emails of from all over the world with all this classified information on that server.
Because it was advantaging their preferred political candidate. Maria, I'm always amazed at how much of political opposition today makes Watergate look like a tea party. It's unbelievable. And when you think about the scandal with regarding to the Russian collusion and that hoax, I mean, they were so determined to prevent Trump from attaining or retaining political power that they were willing to try not only falsifying a story, faking evidence that was sent to the media, but impeaching, bankrupting, and of course trying to jail him.
This is the biggest political scandal that anybody has ever seen, followed by the second biggest political scandal, which is the cover-up of Joe Biden and his mental capacity and use of the auto pen to shape policy. Jonathan, thanks for weighing in. Good to see you, my friend. Jonathan Fehe. Stay with us. We'll be right back.